We can start. Welcome everyone. Culture Center of Vojvodina from city of Novi Sad, which is the European Capital of Culture for 2022, has been organized different conferences and different panels about the trend topics in arts and culture sector. Today, we, under the conference of Culture Lab 21, we will talk about the future of culture. I have to say that today we have a really significant participants from different cities in Europe. And we will start with professor from Architectural University from Novi Sad, Professor Dragana Konstantinović. She will talk about the future of culture in the cities, and she will give the perspective of what the culture and art in the cities look like for the future. After that, we have also one special guest from city of Dublin, Ms. Penelope Kenny. She is an expert in corporate governance and art business sector. And she will give her professional perspective about arts and culture for the future. After that, I will invite Dr. Matthias Rausch to speak about project Next Mayhem, which I think is really one of the best innovative projects in Europe. After Dr. Matthias Rausch, I will invite also Daniela Uren from City of Rijeka to speak about the innovation, art and culture management, and about the culture policy in the cities in Croatia and in Europe. And at the end, we have the artist from Academy of Arts from City of Novi Sad. She will speak, Professor Mirjana Blagojev. She will speak about the position of art in the public space and what kind of art will look like in the future. I would invite Professor Dragana Konstantinović to start with presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Biljana, for this opening speech, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about the future of cities and also about the culture in the city, which is very challenged in the recent period, at least in our space we share in Novi Sad and in this region. So maybe we can just go a step back and maybe talk about the culture of planning of the city, which is the starting point for arts and culture to happen in the city. So this will be my perspective today, just trying to address some global challenges of the future for the cities and these local opportunities we are facing regarding the projects and in arts and culture, but also in comprehension of the city as a framework for art and culture. As you stressed in your introductory speech, Novi Sad is European Capital of Culture this year, and this is also this local opportunity we have for the city, but also for culture and art in the city. Since Professor Blagojev will talk about the art in public space, I will leave to her to talk about these kind of opportunities, and I will just give some wider perspective on the cities, contemporary cities, and the future of the cities. Of course, this is the topic which is very interesting and which is taking a lot of attention between researchers, managers, and all kind of industries, what the city will be in the future, how we address the city in the future, and how we plan the city in the future. And I will just briefly show you some major challenges these researchers stress in their summaries of this kind of endeavors. And as you can see, these are some very popular terms we hear in media about what cities should look like in the future, what are the major challenges regarding sustainability, social challenges of aging, poverty, inequality, what are new economies as a driving force for the city to develop. And these reports look pretty much the same. They just differ. The perspective is maybe different, but they all talk about the need to have technology as a tool, the smart city concept, big data concept, and data infrastructure as a technology which will drive the development of the city. And that these challenges which need to be addressed are numerous, they're diverse, and they're intertwined, and they ask for very collaborative environment in which we can resolve them. The recent report of UN Habitat is stressing these particular challenges, and what is interesting for me in respect of today's talk about culture is this diversity of cities and visions for urban futures. We cannot say that there is one path for city to develop, but every city is particular, and every city asks for its own strategy and for its own vision, I would say, from the perspective of the architect and the planner. And this is why we always have to talk about the global environments and local challenges, which need to adapt these global strategies to local terms. What is something that we don't see very much in our own environment. And here comes the question: what is the future of our city? Regarding these global challenges and local opportunity. And if technology is the answer, what is the question? What is the major topic of our own city? And if this is the planning, or it all starts with planning, we have to wonder what are the major points of this planning. And if we want to take a look from this creative side of planning, of course, it's a very complex, elaborate job of planning, which includes numerous professions and collaborators from all fields. I would say that these 3 points are something which are just something which bring us closer to something we could call spatial management. I think this word management is maybe a proper word today, but it's some kind of creative management. I will explain through this presentation. So the vision is a starting point, of course, which crafts the strategy, which is a local strategy, which takes into account the context and all the layers of the context. And of course, it results in space we plan. How this works, I will just briefly show in one master plan, which gives this spatial framework for everything to happen in the city. It starts with a vision. It says that, for example, for city of Timisoara in Romania, it is a kind of rendezvous of technology and culture. They see that as a starting point for their city, and they see the city as an innovative and intercultural metropolis with a competitive economy supported by cultural heritage values and so on. After that, they evolve this vision into some kind of strategy which tackles 3 major domains. One is economy, the other one is urban well-being, and the third one, which is very important, which we rarely have a chance to talk about, is urban identity. And they say that the city has to have its own style, and which is obtained as a result of architectural competitions and some other public procurement procedures, but which always take into account quality criteria, and which all builds a contemporary image of the city, which is based on diversity of all cultural and artistic layers in the city. This gives the opportunity for the city to have something which is its own image, as they say. Of course, then it's elaborated into plans where or where we have some special zones for these strategies to happen in space. And this is how it works in urban planning. And this is how it happens in our case. City of Novi Sad is very, it wants to build its image as a multicultural city of all the layers of architectural heritage, but in fact, it's a very young city. Although it has a 1 century long history of urban planning, it actually developed significantly in the past 80 years, maybe a little bit more. And it evolved from the city of 30,000 inhabitants into this area of 300,000 inhabitants. So you can just see how this development was very intensive in all terms, in terms of urban morphology, cultural change, and so on. Its planning was based under the vision of modernization and modern architecture and urban planning, which changed the city significantly. And what is interesting, this is one of the first master plans for Novi Sad from 1950, which gave the vision of the city in drawings. That is how the planners and architects worked in the second half of the 20th century. They envisioned everything through the urban form, through space and everything. And then through this kind of sketches, they shared their vision with future users of the city. And now we came to the point that our current urban policy and urban planning came to the point which results in urban unrest, riots and civil unrest above the implementation of the document. Even we cannot but wonder how this happened and what are these missing points of urban planning of the city, and why are citizens so unpleased with this new master plan. What is evident that it lacks the vision. Basically, the vision for the city is unclear. We cannot say what is the essence of the city, and then we cannot but wonder how, if this city does not offer some kind of firm vision of what it wants to become, then how it can serve as an infrastructure for everything to happen within the same city. And what is this character of the city which is inherent to this city? We have to avoid these generic images and just look for something which is more particular for the city. For example, the new vision of the city does not in any way takes into account the fact that this title is happening this year, and that we, for example, have the infrastructure and this cultural image we created during 2022, which could be the starting point for the vision for the city for the future. For example, it does not say that Novi Sad is young or vibrant city, it is a university city or anything else. It just does not bring anything which could be some kind of static identity for the city and for the citizen, unlike the other city I'm showing here today. When there is no vision, then this strategy is basically in some general points, and which miss some very important points. That is why some professionals joined up to give some strategical kind of points which could be beneficial for this master plan. And one of these points is stressing the issue of culture and cultural identity. And basically it says that Novi Sad is both Baroque, neoclassical and modern city, that the planning of the city and the planning of its infrastructure should take into account these diverse historical layers and treat them as equal and valuable, what is very troublesome today. And in the end, this spatial distribution based on this kind of unclear vision and generic strategy brings the city, which give us the plan of the city, which does not spatially supports the development of central functions of the city. I mean, public spaces and public infrastructure, which is essential for arts and culture. This is the city of Ljubljana from Slovenia, one example. And these red zones show this spreading of central functions from the city center to this suburban area. And if you, in contrast to Novi Sad, you will see that we do not have this kind of spatial infrastructure which will support these central functions. And what is even worse, these red areas in our planning are not exclusively for public spaces, but some kind of very speculative enterprises and developments which are mostly based on housing. So when we talk about this spatial distribution, we can also talk about some major elements on which it is based. One is definitely the balance of density, and which differs from city to the city, and which actually provides this urban setting for example, public spaces, which are very important for public life and for this kind of cultural living in the city. So basically, we are talking all the time about the culture of planning. So urban density is something which is really challenging. Here today, it is challenging all over the globe, but here we don't take it as a one really important point. We have this constant replacement of public space with some commercial kind of space. And this then the next point for spatial management and spatial distribution is this balance of programs, which is very important for making diversity and making the setting for cohabitation and collaboration. It affects this neighborhood feeling. Also, it affects transportation needs, increases possibility for for sustainable urban setting, but it also boosts the social diversity, which is essential for every healthy city environment. This is the example from Vienna, the famous lake city of Aspern, which, for example, is balancing the programs of housing and working in the same ratio. So you have 20,000 inhabitants with 20,000 jobs by 2028. And this creates the opportunities for all kinds of urban spaces, which are, of course, essential, and all kinds of urban settings, which are also semi-public and completely public spaces, which are promoting the culture of living, which is very important as a starting point in the urban life. And then, of course, the balance of social structures, which is essential for every urban environment, and which is stressed in every of these reports I shown at the beginning. This is Sao Paulo, and you can see this clear cut between different social structures. The city of Aspern, which I showed you previously, but also some other examples like Lyon Confluence project are pretty much based on this kind of mixing of all social structures. And for example, I will just read some data for Lyon Confluence. It has 25% of social housing, 50% of affordable housing, and 10% of rent-controlled housing, which creates the opportunity for all social groups to find their housing and dwelling in the same area, and promotes this healthy urban environment. And of course, these offers which are accessible to all social structures, this is one of the major issues for every on which every talk about urban culture starts. It's accessibility of culture and arts for all social structures, which is very important. And this is something which already happens, although this project is not finished in a whole. It is promoting all these issues already. What is even more important is that this social cohesion and social diversity is seen as an opportunity for sustainable action, and they are offering different kind of programs, and of course they have their own targets. They want to get on by 2021 and after that. And these targets are also possible within this kind of social framework they envisioned. So if we say that the culture of urban planning rests of envisioning, I would say, which is very important, and then through the strategical planning comes to kind of implementation, and that these key elements of city planning, which are of course balance of programs, of density and of social structures, will give us these desirable outcomes which come in the form of health and safety, environment, sustainability, and so on. What is essential for this to achieve is new kind of urban governance, which is using all these technological tools I was talking about at the beginning, but it is also based on innovation, participation of the citizens in the process, which will not end up in the situation we had in Novi Sad during this year, on collaboration. And what is interesting on collaboration between public and private entities, we still have to see the way how this works. And also it asks for a new model of creativity, I would say. Now we have, compared to the period of the 20th century, when we have these visionary architects and urban planners who gave us their vision in the form of drawing. Now we have to have urban planners which have to embrace new kind of creativity, which is maybe more in the form of spatial management and understanding of very complex surroundings in which they create. And this new model of creativity is something we call strategic creativity in architecture, which is not giving the final form, but thinking, going back with thinking on strategical level, and just providing opportunities for urban form to happen in the future through urban competitions and so on. We talk about particular futures. We of course have global experiences, but we need to have a local adaptation and application. No generic strategies, but carefully tailored strategies for each city, based on thorough understanding of the context and its peculiarities. And this will probably take us to diverse, layered, comfortable, and safe urban setting in which the culture of planning will result in culture of living, I would say. And this is something we have to address even strongly in our environment, because this is very challenging issue today. I will end up with this thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dragana. You have given to us already the conclusion of all process of position of culture in urban space for the future. And now we will go to Ms. Penelope Kenny. She will speak about a little bit different than the urban planning, but also very, very important. It's about how we governance the arts and culture, what are the finance, how we will find the way to finance the arts and culture. So please, Ms. Penelope, start with the presentation.
Thank you so much, Biljana. And I'm so pleased to be here today. And I know that the beginning of our own, I'm just going to share my screen right now. The beginning of our own relationship started with, and I must stop sharing my screen for a moment, a lovely book that,
yes,
that is yours, but
yes,
that I contributed a chapter to it a number of years ago. So I'm so pleased to be here today. So on that, very quickly, I'm going to switch and share, and also, as I've been reminded, slideshow share it so that you can see just the one large screen. Okay, so now you should see the entire slideshow, and Dunya should be happy with my tech skills here. So what I want to talk to you about is the future of arts and culture, but as Biljana said, through the lens of the governance and finance side, but I'm not really going to talk too much about that. And what I was so proud to show today is, of course, the beautiful images that a lecture like this normally elicits from you. And so my front image is the Solaris Nexum from Alexandra Karn. I'm really building here on Dragana's previous comments. This beautiful sculpture is in the Grange, is in our new university out in Grangegorman Technology University, Dublin. And you can see it's put in the science and engineering block behind concrete panels. And yet here we have a piece of publicly commissioned art hanging in a building that informs both the building itself, what it does, and the importance of arts and culture within that building. And so the artist says that it serves as a monument to solar connection through the ages in a technologically symbiotic age, being into one harmonious whole. And that really is what I want to build on today, the idea of arts and culture growing and permeating through the various aspects of our society. And so Technology University commissioned this, and I want to talk about not just the artifact itself, but the governance and commissioning behind it. So just to show you the beautiful piece of art, the panel shape of the mirror utilizes static and dynamic triangles from sacred geometry to acknowledge the Platonic elements while giving a sense of movement, evolution, and perpetual change in our natural systems. And it's the latter, the perpetual change of our natural systems, is I think why we're here today talking about the future of arts and culture. So the artifact is called Solaris Nexum, and I'm very proud indeed to be on the board of Grangegorman Development Agency, who are part of this commissioning. And so next I want not to just talk about the artifact, but more importantly for ourselves today, the provenance of this. Why is this here? So why did Technology University commission this? Well, there's a number of very good reasons behind it. First thing is the 1% for the arts scheme in Dublin is also, it means that the cost of any publicly funded capital infrastructure and building development can be allocated to commissioning of a work of art. And the scheme has been made available to all capital projects across all government departments. And so you see in a large publicly funded building construction project, 1% is being spent on art, either outdoor sculpture or, as we saw, an indoor commissioned piece. And that piece would be publicly tendered. And in our case, I'm very proud to have set up an artistic panel that judged the commissioning of this piece of art. Now, the 1% for Art scheme is also in the UK, it's also in California, and I think that France has something quite similar. So embedding it financially, I think our arts within our public construction projects has made a big difference and is very important going forward. It is a public arts project. The aim of our programme in Grangegorman is to support the ongoing commissioning of artworks which have the imaginative potential to address the possibilities of this context. And I'm echoing what Dragana said a moment ago, build a legacy into the future. So, for example, in Grange Grumman, we have a memories project, and this is, and I want to build on what was said a moment ago, is the idea of why we're building, where we're building, and the history and the people that have been in that space and in that area before, particularly in the case of our university site, which was a prison, and which also transported people from Ireland to Tasmania. And so we got a Tasmanian-based artist who created an installation about women transported to Australia from a prison. It was also a lunatic asylum called a lunatic asylum mental health facility, where there was a huge amount of suffering. And so this site, the embodiment of the Memories project into this site and the building of a university, can only really be done so successfully by artists and at such speed by artists to embody the past and to embrace the future and its exciting future history. And so we are, through our Histories project, uncovering and cataloguing and memorialising the 200-year sad and long history of our site. And so I start with one specific project and how it's governed, and I want to go from this to the general and then back again on this talk today. And so that is my one beautiful example, and also the importance of its provenance. Why is it here? And so I want to talk also about, in terms of the future of arts and culture, examining the unseen questions of our time. And to quote the Global Director of Arts of the British Council, there's never been a time in our contemporary life where art, corporate and policy worlds need to come together to reveal the new unseen questions of our time that will help project and be a catalyst for creative intervention and invention. And I'm certainly here today because I do believe that the cultural and artistic interventions in today's world are the only way of creating the interventions that we need at the speed that we need them. And certainly in the Grange Grumman project, we realised that it was the artistic interventions that created the important building and healing and integrating of the past and present with the site, which could not be done through any other medium other than the arts. And I'm probably just echoing provide cities and towns the opportunity to partner with artists and creative workers in order to think creatively about the future, repair harm, which I'm talking about here, and increase civic participation and more. And so the importance of a community in the future of our arts and culture. And because arts and culture helps us explain the world around us. And I look to the States, which I find is a place that has quite different type of approach to arts and culture. It tends to be much more commercial than the Western side of the world. And Laura Zabel said, everyone needs to challenge our rage, pain, joy, shame, and pride, and artists help us find those channels. So quickly, and my mandate from Biljana is, let's talk about funding and governance. And so the trend in arts and culture looking to the future is, and this was really crystallized by the pandemic. In the pandemic in Ireland in 2020, we increased our funding for the arts 41%, even though there was a pandemic going on. And it increased again for Ireland a huge amount to 130 million. And I think this is really the realization of our governments realizing the importance of arts and culture, particularly in today's fractured world from the pandemic, in, if you like, what I would consider the birth of a new order of being and thinking that has come about from the enormous tumultuous experience of the recent past. In the UK, you can see they've had their issues in 2021 too, but a big spike in funding for the arts in 2020, and in France, a 75% increase in an already well-funded budget to 273 million. And so a general trend from these three to talk about funding for the arts. And I suggest funding from the arts from governments tends to come about from popular demand, but from a fear of how are we going to deal with the issues of today. And we need to give more funding to the arts and allow them to have impacts on our society. And so my close to my heart subject, the future of arts and culture, I hope, will be facilitated by corporate governance. And in Ireland, the UK, Europe at the moment, there is a big emphasis on funding for governance within the arts, which will facilitate artists, one, getting more funding, but two, being organised as enablers, and our organisations being organised as enablers for great art. Funders and regulators are requiring our artists and our organisations to be well governed. And if there's an arts organisation that wants an effective board of directors making effective decisions, this is the governance that's now being required, for example, by arts councils before people are getting funding. And for me, from where I'm standing, this organization of the arts is, first thing, it's bringing arts closer to being well managed and having a louder voice in our society. Rather than the isolated artists, we're now showcasing our arts and bringing them more into a visible, transparent place where they can be where they can be enabled to contribute to produce great art in our society. The implication of this is access to more funding and greater importance for cultural organisations to act as a vehicle to nurture and enable better arts and culture. So an organisation of the sector, a recognition that the sector is an equal sector to the commercial sectors and to the other sectors in our society. And the trend for arts and culture to become more professional, better organised and funded, university degrees in arts management, for example, and a sector which will be grown in order to amplify its voice in our society. And so corporate governance is the big enabler at the moment for that. And long may it last, because this is amplifying the voice of arts and culture in our society. And I see, and I was thinking of what is the future of arts and culture, and I saw the pandemic as being the big break, the big fracture. And I looked at what has happened in previous pandemics, and, you know, post one of the bigger pandemics, the Renaissance happened. And I started to wonder if we were in fact on the cusp of a new way of thinking and a new order, and perhaps we are. I think that the pandemic has changed the psyche about thinking how we work. Work used to mean dignified living. You know, you worked, you earned money, you lived. And yet in the pandemic, a lot of people couldn't work. And now society and community mean dignified living, because those people were taken care of in the pandemic. It was difficult for everybody, but there was a world feeling of nobody should starve if they're not able to work in a pandemic. And so being in part of a society and community, meaning dignified living rather than just my own work. And the concept of the minimum living wage here is going to change the way we think about work and society. Wellness has become an important social attribute, and the pandemic has moved us closer to taking care of everyone. And the idea of not going to work because I'm not well, because I could give everybody COVID and they could all die, I think is going to change very fundamentally the way we think about work, community and society, and taking care of everybody in our community. And I love the current focus on outcomes, not outputs. And I'm going to talk about this in the context of climate change. And we used to live in a society where an extractive society, I suppose, that dug up minerals and talked about outputs that created profits. And now we're saying to our large organizations like our oil companies and mining companies, we want to not just talk about your outputs this year, but what were your outcomes for the globe? What were the results of your work in a much broader context rather than just a financial one? And I think that this is a post-pandemic different future for arts and culture. The concept of outcomes, because artists, particularly under British Labour governments, artists were often asked to quantify their outputs and say, well, so we've given you a lot of money, what have you produced in our society? And the answer from artists is, well, we can't really measure that. But when a society starts to shift its thinking and focus on, well, what were the outcomes from our from our funding to the Arts Council, from artistic endeavours this year, the outcomes are very fundamental. And indeed, we've seen from Dragana's presentation, the outcomes for society and community of good architecture, the outcomes from building a new university with artifacts in it are huge. They are part of who we are, our identity and our souls. And my own personal comment at the bottom, cooperation between states during the pandemic, still hugely lacking, but clearly I think the need for that cooperation from health policy and services was shown quite clearly in the pandemic, and where it didn't work created such enormous misery and hardship. And so through the lens of, is there a minimum living wage in the world that is going to change the way we think? And so I wanted to look at the issues of our time, climate change, COVID and the post-pandemic, and the fracture in our society. And as I saw recently, the age of anxiety, where we're seeing so many people wanting to work in different ways, wanting to work from home, leaving the workplace, staying sick, staying out of the workplace because they're sick and anxious, and the anxiety of our Gen Zs. I live with the Gen Z, who is a very, very different sort of person from what I am. And so the age of anxiety, I think, is a different way of accessing community, arts and culture in the future. And so I want to talk a little bit more about climate change through the lens of the arts and culture and our future. So I accessed a site which asked a few hundred questions to artists, and they grouped the questions into these dots and showed people's concerns for the future of arts and culture at the moment. And so I want to give all credit to the future of artsandculture.org here. But I thought that the results that the survey came up with were very much worthwhile looking at today. The future of arts and culture showed the issues that artists saw today, the issues that artists and people involved in the arts sector saw today, the questioning of the value of art and culture. And I think I see clearly museums becoming different, becoming more entrepreneurial, but becoming more serving of a community rather than storehouses of our ancient treasures. The idea of inclusivity and diversity in our societies driving different ways of thinking. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about diversification from Western canon. And so many times we see art through the lens of Western eyes. And that shift, I think, is going to change fundamentally the way we see art, the way we think about it, the way we fund it, and the way we treat it. There is changing audiences, and you can see the other areas of concern, the new modes of consumption, and I've mentioned Gen Z, a generation that I think I'm looking forward to the surveys coming through on what Gen Z are doing, but they are very different people. They are not consuming the way we consume, and I think that they're changing the way we think about consumption. And you see even kids saying, oh, I'm not buying new clothes, or I'm not consuming the way throwing things out. And I think this is going to change the future of our societies and communities. And so to zoom in on two of the points from the previous slides, the fresh infusion of diversity is helping to drive new experimentation across different disciplines, and it is reinvigorating arts and culture at the grassroots. And I think the emphasis in the world today on diversity is allowing this change to happen, and it is reinvigorating arts and culture as we know it. And then climate change is the one issue that will touch almost all aspects: social demands, economic capacity, technological innovation, public values. And I was just discussing it recently, and I thought, you know, if somebody said, oh, the big issue of our time is world hunger, we can all see a way that we could solve world hunger. The fact that we choose to do it or not is separate. But I don't think there's anybody in the world today that can say we can figure out a way of solving climate change. Not yet, not clearly. And our many, many small efforts are probably causing us that anxiety and stress that we talked about earlier. And so climate change is changing fundamentally the way we think about our future. And I think arts and culture are probably the most accelerated, the most fastest way of assessing that thinking. The greater attention to societal awareness costs, and as I've said before, the impacts rather than the tangible outcomes. And last, and I want to, this is my last comment, and I've gone from the particular to the general, and I'm going back to some beautiful images that I came across during the summer, this one in Spain, where arts and culture are now are showing us a different way of thinking. And this is just one example. This is an exhibition by Sandra Gomara Heshiki. It's called Good Government. But it shows colonizing through the lens of the colonizers and the colonized. And of course, when I come from Ireland, I deeply understand the colonization and a post-colonization era. And this was Spain and the Andean culture, where you can see the colonizers looking out from their lens, beautifully dressed, at lots and lots of people. And then the other view of the colonizers being just sketched in, and the people being in their own houses, not looking at them. But there's so many different interpretations, and a post-colonial world not looking through the Western eyes is going to be a very interesting and very different world, and hopefully will address our unconscious biases. In Ireland, we've examined in a post-colonial way our own concept of questioning whether we are considering cultural inferiority of one culture being superior or inferior to another, and how that has been influenced by colonialism. And the preoccupation, I think, in many parts of the world today of what is post-colonial looking like, and how do we resolve these issues, are one of the a preoccupation of artists today that I find utterly refreshing, affecting independence, progress, and modernization, which I highlighted here. So I loved these images, which are only a tiny part of a much bigger piece of work by Sandra Gomara Heshiki. And so what would a post-colonial worldview look like? And does this mean a diversification, as we've seen from the Western canon? And lastly, my idea, or Ireland's idea, of examining whether we see ourselves through a lens of cultural inferiority, and indeed many other cultures do so too, without any good reason for that, because that is a borrowed construct. And so as I draw to an end, and you've asked me to write a conclusion, we will be defined by our post-pandemic fracture. And I leave the word fracture because I do think it has created a big fracture in time, in community, in society, in the way we think. And we've seen the minimum living wage concept coming through. It will show up in communities, society, the way we work, the way we build, as we've seen from Dragana, and the way we interact with each other. It is facilitated by climate change, but arts and culture, I think, will facilitate, if not provide, solutions to climate change. And as we've seen on the Grange Gorman campus, the idea of art and culture coming in to interpret the past into the present and merge our thinking with the two. And I think that the speed at which arts and culture can do that and can change the way we think about things is really our last available attempt in the climate change scenario to provide solutions, which are not going to be provided by an input-output extractive type economic thinking. And this will be enabled by a living wage concept, quite a liberating concept, our changed relationship with work and with wellness, and will become essential to speed the discourse. I suppose I'm writing it more eloquently than I've said it, will become essential to speed the discourse and to start conversations. And I question, like the Solaris Nexum, which I'm so proud of to be part of that Grange Gorman development. And so hopefully arts and culture will speed the discourse around climate change and start the conversations, if not provide the solutions. And so finally, just to give you my details and to allow me to put in an extra image of the Solaris Nexum, I just want to say thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed developing these slides and thinking the provocative thoughts presented to me by Biljana today.
Dear Penelope, thank you very much for deep analytic of what kind of arts and culture will be for the future. I would like to ask you to send your fantastic presentation to all participants of this conference. because it's really important to us to have it in one paper. Thank you very much. And now I will invite Dr. Matthias Rausch from City of Mannheim to start with his presentation. Matthias, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Biljana, for having me. And I'll start presentation mode. Can you see it?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So what I'm going to do briefly is trying to give you an overview of the creative city strategy that Mannheim has developed over the last 22 years, roughly. It's only going to be a very brief overview of the developments here in Mannheim. For those of you who are not familiar with Mannheim, Mannheim is a city in the southwest of Germany at the rivers Rhine and Neckar. It's an old industrial working class town with about 320,000 people currently. And the city has developed a creative city strategy starting about 20 years ago. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the details of this. The first installment was in 2001, actually, where the city installed the first municipal commissioner for rock and pop music over 20 years ago. So a person that was only there to help and support rock and pop musicians. 2 years later, the Pop Academy opened. Some of you might be familiar with this institution. You can study music business as well as creative industries, as well as popular music design with bachelor as well as master degrees. And about 5 or 6 years ago, the Pop Academy also added a world music program that has been very successful with a focus on Arabic music. In 2004, the Music Park opened, which we run next Mannheim, which is a 100% subsidiary of the city. The chairman of the board is Mayor Peter Kurz. We currently have 50 employees and run a total of 8 hubs and with about 35,000 square meters of office space that we provide to companies here in Mannheim. Half of those hubs have a focus on culture and creative industries, and then these are the ones that I'm going to focus on in my presentation. The first one that we opened was the Music Park here in 2004, the only startup center for the music industry in Germany, still to this day, exclusively. We have the entire realm of the music industry represented in the hub. So we have recording studios, there's TV studios, there's management, promotion companies, labels, etc., up to security companies that primarily work in the music industry field. Currently, we have 60 companies here, and it's been a very important addition to the music support structure in place in Mannheim. In 2007, there was an important strategic step in Mannheim as the city published its strategic goals, and goal 6 there being that Mannheim wants to be in a leading position in terms of being recognized for being a culturally vibrant and thriving creative industry city, and will do everything in its power to reach that goal. So as opposed to most other cities in Germany that I know of, it's where the development towards a creative city is more bottom up. In Mannheim, it was a fairly top-down process that was administered and facilitated by Mayor Peter Kurz, who, as one of the first mayors, in my opinion, in Germany, saw the clear impact that culture and creative industries could have on urban development. And he supported and fostered a unique support structure for the culture and creative industries with a particular focus on music and the music industry. In 2008, we installed a film commissioner. So there's a person for everyone involved in the moving images industry. He helps with location scouting or permissions, etc. And also, of course, does consulting and advice work in the film industry section. Another hub that we run is the Alte Volksbad, with about 30 companies currently, also creative industry focus, where we're trying to develop directly urban development impact in the neighborhood of the Neckarstadt West. which is a very diverse neighborhood. Generally, in Mannheim is a very multicultural city with over 177 nationalities currently calling Mannheim their home, and always has been historically, by the way. So if you go back in history, Mannheim has always been a very multicultural city, and it's part of the DNA of the city, and the citizens are very proud of this multicultural aspect of the city. Then in 2014, Mannheim was granted access to the UNESCO Creative Cities Network as a city of music. And we've been extending our international networks and our exchange with colleagues from all over the world in this regard. And it's been very helpful with bringing people or granting networking access and market access to stakeholders here in Mannheim as well. In 2015, we opened another creative industries hub called C-Hub that you can see here on this picture with 4,000 square meters and about 40 companies currently residing here. What's special here, we have little showrooms on the first floor where people can directly see or showcase their products and their services. And we have a municipal gallery right across the street that runs 6 exhibitions a year, also always featuring local and regional artists, where you can directly purchase the art, but of course you can just visit and experience the art there directly as well. Another hub that we run focused on the fashion and textile industries, the ESD Textilerei. That's one of our smallest hub with about 8 companies currently. We have a small machinery park that the companies can use free of charge for prototypes or small additions. And they also communally run a retail store where they directly sell their products to the end consumer. That's been in place since 2015. In 2018, Mannheim was also the first city to introduce the position of a night mayor, being sort of at the intersection of the city administration, night culture stakeholders, so bar and club owners, all the people involved in night culture and nightlife. And the concept has been pioneered by the colleagues in Amsterdam. But in Mannheim, Germany, Mannheim was the first city to introduce such a position. And up to this point, I think we have about 7 or 8 other German cities that have followed the example of Mannheim and has introduced such a position. What are his objectives? It's mainly mediation if there are conflicts during the night, so noise complaints, etc., or if there's littering. He tries to improve also mobility aspects during night, safety issues, inclusivity, inclusion, sustainability are important aspects. But of course, he's also trying to strengthen and extend the networks of night culture in Mannheim and the region. And he tries to co-creatively come up with new formats for the night in Mannheim as well, together with diverse stakeholders of the night culture and nighttime economy in Mannheim. I wanted to briefly just give some very concrete examples of what our objectives are in the Cultural Innovation Creative Economy Department at Next Mannheim that I'm fortunate to head. And I brought some numbers, and these are going to be the only numbers. Don't worry. But I'm always asked why is culture and the creative industry such a central aspect of a company that is primarily there to support the innovation ecosystem of a city. We strongly believe, and we're not the only ones, that culture and the creative industry have to be a central aspect of any innovation ecosystem, because there's a direct relation between cultural vibrancy on the one hand and the innovation capabilities of a city or a region on the other hand. The numbers that I brought here are from the Cultural and Creative Cities Monitor of the European Union 2017. There's been a 2019 edition as well. You can go check it out online. It's freely available. That again show that cultural and creative cities have per average 90% more jobs, 8% more young people, a great number more students in higher education, more highly educated people, and also more EU foreigners, and also 26% non-EU foreigners. So some of the main arguments for culture in innovation ecosystem, and this is probably not new to anyone, but I'm still going to repeat it, is its culture is an important aspect when it comes to attracting talent and investments to a city, of course. So it's an important locational factor. It contributes significantly to the well-being and quality of life in a city. And it can also support and facilitate intercultural dialogue and social cohesion, which, again, as I tried to point out, is very important in a city like Mannheim with over 170 nationalities living very closely together here. So I think, culture as a bridge, as a means to form at least temporary communities, I think is very essential, and it's very important to understand. And last but not least, I think culture is always also a driver, or can be a driver, of cross-sector innovation for other sectors. I think this is an aspect that has been briefly overlooked in the past, but I think becomes increasingly important. And I'm going to try to showcase briefly how we're trying to integrate artistic thinking in entrepreneurial context here in Mannheim with a few specific examples. What are the objectives of the Cultural Innovation and Creative Economy Department? We do so-called cross-innovation projects at the intersection of art, culture and creative industries, business, technology, and science or academia that we try to initiate, facilitate, and support. We do so-called creative placemaking projects where we go into public space through cultural and creative interventions and try to show potential of places or how places could also be used. Then the entire topic of night governance that I already elaborated on a little bit with regard to the nightmare. And then the entire creative economy support with a focus on the music industry, design industry, film industry, and the fashion industry as part of the design industry. What are some of the projects that we've been involved in the past? One example for a cross-innovation project at the intersection of music and medicine or medicine technology that we initiated together with the University Hospital, the Fraunhofer Institute, and musicians and artists here in Mannheim. One strand of the project was that in the oncological daycare facility where people go for treatments and have to spend about 6, 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10 hours there for chemotherapy treatments, for instance, or other treatments, there were no means to listen to music, surprisingly. So what we did is very simple. There are now iPods that are curated by genre and people can listen to music. But more importantly, we also started having professional musicians there, and the patients can now actually play music with professionals there if they choose to, if they want to. The background or the incentive to do that was that there are medical studies that show that if you are able to transform this experience that is almost entirely negatively associated. So I'm losing my hair, I get sick, all the people around me are fairly sick. If you try to change that or transform that a little bit into the positive, the drugs work better, they're taken more regularly, and you need less of them. So what we did is to use music in this regard as a driver towards this more positive experience during the oncological daycare facility. A second project is a little bit more technical, was in the realm of neurosurgery with brain tumors. We came up with an entirely new procedure for brain tumor surgeries where people are brought back into consciousness during the operation, and a person communicates with the people in order to impair the language center of the brain, for instance. So we were able to, I'm not going to go into the details because it would take too long, but it's now in practice at the University Hospital. There have been medical studies, and basically what we did is to bring in people from the music industry together with engineers and the neurosurgeon, and tried and facilitated a completely new process of how these brain tumor surgeries are now taking place at the University Hospital. Another example for the way we try to do cross-innovation projects is what we call creative residency programs, where we try to integrate artists and creatives in entrepreneurial context directly. You might be familiar with the usual artist residencies where there's an artist and he or she works on his or her art for a duration of, I don't know, 3, 5, 6 months. This is not our primary intention here. What we're trying to do is here have a creative or an artist be part of a project team from a completely different disciplinary perspective. And we've done this, we've tested this out at our accelerator program where we coach and teach startups for 5 weeks. But we've also piloted this over a longer period here with a company where an artist was part of a project team for a longer period of time. Our understanding is that artists and creatives think differently than engineers or business people, for instance, and can challenge or can deal with aspects like ambiguity, or if you can't plan processes, or if you don't know where you're going to end up in the end. So for all innovation or change processes, we found it very productive to have artists be integrated in these processes, because if you create art, you never know where you're going to end up. It's always an open process. And artists have developed a mindset to deal with this insecurity and with the risk of failure as well, to an extent that perhaps other people in the business context, in the business world, have not been able to yet. So it's basically we're trying to transfer artistic thinking in entrepreneurial context through these residencies. We also do an Uncover Design Festival where we're trying to position design as a field for societal transformation. A lot of people, at least in Germany, still associate design primarily with aesthetic means of, creating a nice website or nice business cards, etc. But that's only a very small aspect of what design can do. So again, here we're trying to position design as a central avenue for the transformation of our global challenges, if you will, and we're trying to really showcase this in a conference format. We have an exhibition format. We also have a design prize that we give out every 2 years, and to really showcase the potentials of design in this regard. I brought a couple of images, but I'm not going to roll this because of time. With regard to a few creative placemaking projects, we started a platform called Startraum, which is a platform that is aiming to facilitate pop-up uses. So if you're looking for a vacancy in the city, you can log on to the site and you will find which vacancies there are. And then you will be put in contact, not directly, you can't directly contact the owner of the space, but we will facilitate the discussion and moderate it. If you go to the site currently, it's not used in that way, but we're going to bring it back to its original function, because we've been using this platform to facilitate apartments for people from Ukraine that have arrived here. But it's going to be put back into its original function very soon. We've also did a pop-up use festival last year for 10 days in order to strengthen trust with people owning properties in real estate, because we find that a lot of the time still people are hesitant when it comes to pop-up uses because they can't really see the benefits. So we've tried to improve this situation a little bit with a festival, and I think that was very successful in this regard. We're going to continue to do this in the future. We did a little project here called Parkraumwunder. I'm just going to roll a few clips here so you can see the images, where we try to start a discussion about this dead parking space situation in the cities. And we built a wooden car structure, if you will, that can be legally parked in parking spots in the city. And it can be transferred to any position in the city that anyone wants. It's a common good, if you will. And what we're trying to do was to get people to think about how could we more creatively and productively use this dead parking space that, a car sits there for about 95% of the time and nothing happens in there. So how can we perhaps give an incentive or impulse to use this space in a more productive fashion, and also have a higher quality of life in our inner cities. I think this is one of the big challenges in the future that we're going to have to tackle. Another project that we just started, I'm just going to roll the clips here, is we started our first Mannheim Busking Festival, especially in the downtown center, in order to also bring more culture, creativity, and arts in the on High Street, in the main shopping areas. And I think, you know, this is also an incentive to really think about how culture, arts, and creativity can be integrated in the downtown areas more effectively in the futures. As you know, probably all cities in Europe are undergoing a transformation with regard to the downtown centers, and I think culture and the creative industries should play a central and very significant role here in this transformation. Another project here with regard to placemaking was a little project that we did on a tram, a regular tram, where you just have to get a ticket, and we used live music during several days, where people just jumped on the train and then they could listen to live music. What was very interesting to see is how the function of the tram really changed. People interacted differently. They experienced themselves and the space differently, and it was just a little experiment, a very simple idea to see, you know, what effects arts and culture can have in public spaces or spaces that are not usually associated with art and culture. We've done this at least, I don't know, 6, 7, or 8 times, because the company running the trams was so happy about it that we were asked to do it several times over. We also do a Mannheim International Placemaking Forum, where we're trying to bring international experts to Mannheim and exchange on creative placemaking, and also create benefits for the Mannheim stakeholders. I'm not going to run the clip here. I've brought a short example of a creative placemaking project called Haltestelle Fortschritt, which translates into station progress, if you will. Which was one of the first placemaking projects that we supported. What did we do? We went into a place of fear, I guess, where we had a violent crime. A lot of alcoholics and drug addicts hang out there during the day. It's not optimally lit, especially at night. So a lot of people really try to circumvent this area and not use this, but it has very clear, distinct urban qualities, like a green area and a sporting facility, but it's not used in this regard. So what we did is we built a temporary architecture out of wood, and we programmed it with music, we had film screenings, we had readings, we did a one-day conference on urban development, completely free under the bridge. We did an urban hacking workshop with the communication design students of the university here that developed ideas during the festival and also showcased it during the festival. And this has been an important aspect for giving us the opportunity to now have funds available to support civic initiatives with regard to placemaking. So we can now provide funds to people who want to do their own creative placemaking projects in their neighborhood, and also give a bit of process support for people who have never done projects like these. Finally, what I always call a digital placemaking project is Mix the City. Some of you might be familiar with the project. We did this several years ago together with the British Council Tel Aviv. The basic idea is very simple. You pick 12 artists from your city and film them with 2 very short samples in your city. And out of that, out of these 24 samples, you can create and mix your own soundtrack of the city. It sounds like a very trivial and simple idea, but it's a lot more complex than I had envisioned when I first started working on this project. You can really make music with this, and I've not heard 2 mixes that sound completely alike. You can also, of course, you can share it, you can download it, and it has a nice participatory aspect to it that connects music, space, and the avenue of creating your own soundtrack of what you think the city should sound like. And finally, as a last example, I'm not going to run the clip because of time. In 2019, we started the first French-German cultural entrepreneurship summit called Allez Hop, because we wanted to more closely align the French and German cultural entrepreneurs, because we found there was hardly any interaction between these two, surprisingly, even though the political partnership between France and Germany with regard to the overall strategies of the European Union, I think, are fairly strong. On the working level in the cultural and creative industries, cooperations are very minimal. And we wanted to kickstart this development and strengthen this cooperation a little bit with this 3-day summit, which was the first summit of its kind that I know of between France and Germany in this regard. And here are some images from this conference. And I think with regard to time, I'm going to stop here. If you have questions, critique, if you want to exchange ideas afterwards, please feel free to get in touch. Very much looking forward to the other presentations, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Matthias. It's really significant what kind of innovative projects Mannheim is going on in the Mannheim. And I see its cross-sectorial approach goes to holistic in one way. And I can suggest you, since I'm teaching in Kedge Business School in Paris and Bordeaux, maybe they will be interesting for cooperation with Project Next Mannheim, because they are dealing with the same topic as you are. It's arts and development, creative industries and entrepreneurs and innovation. So we will be in touch regarding this. And also I will ask you to share your presentation to the participant of the conference. Now I kindly invite Daniela Urem to speak a little bit about Croatia, about City of Rijeka, in general about innovation in art and culture management. Thank you.
Thank you, Biljana. Yes, I will talk more about situation in Croatia and focusing on this part of the Europe. I will gladly share our own experience, Rijeka being a European Capital of Culture in 2020, and also talk about importance of education in regards of innovating cultural policies and management. In this part, I will introduce a MAS project that we worked for the past 3 years, creating a master module in art, science and technology, and also about Unical project, actually created as a part of our Rijeka's European Capital of Culture bid, which for the 7 consecutive years became innovation in education, in cultural arts, policy and management. So I will share a MAS project website, because I think that this will be the easiest to walk you through and to introduce what partners, so the 7 partners, University of Graz, University of Madeira, from Croatia, Croatian Cultural Alliance, as well Kersnikova from Slovenia, and University of Nova Gorica, we created together. So I'll share screen. Okay, so the MAS project worked on actually innovating the practices and innovating the education, trying to approach the questions that are topics of this conference as well. So the notion of cultural innovation, of course, requires adapting our approach of overall co-creation. And in doing so, we can ask many questions. So understanding the importance of digitalization in the cultural management, we can talk about what are the innovative ways of capacity buildings of our younger generation, as well as future of audience development. So there are really many different ways that we can approach. It's too broad, so I need to focus on something. The Unical project, as I said, was innovative in a way that we were trying over the span of 7 years, adapting new forms of educational practices and theory, listening to younger generations, trying to make it understandable and more free to them, learning from them as well. We, for example, created a part called Speaking Through the Innovation, where we invited different faculty members who were actually talking about not private things, but talking about their own experience. It looked like students were listening to a private talk of two important educators, and in that way they really asked and felt more free, which is completely different than in educational university settings. So we were testing and applying many new ways that really became important of understanding how we can go forward in innovating the educational system overall. Of course, the cultural policy and educational policy were very important in communicating with us in doing so. At the end, we end up with a new document, which is career development for artists and students in art, that for the first time included a personal development as well. So the holistic approach that I'm now presenting is the only way we innovate further. The MUST manual, which we produced, it's downloadable at the MUST website. So it's here. And curriculum, it's accredited at the University of Nova Gorica. So I as well invite everybody to look through this manual and to as well talk to students to apply. The Unical project became the first innovative study inside the MUST project at the European level. It will continue the next summer. So the new curriculum for the 8th edition of the Unical program will be online by November this year. We are very closely as well looking at the new European Bauhaus project that I believe it's one of the most important initiatives at the European level that is talking about our togetherness and the beautiful heritage that we all share. So As well, we had many practical approaches as the Mass Challenge Labs. We work together at the European level with all our networks. So it's this exchange of different kind of experiences is something that I see coming in the future for our own development. And we can say that cultural innovation in Europe is being adapted for designing a strategy working group which are dedicated to research and coming from social sciences and humanities. So I can talk about many different innovative projects that we worked with. Some of them were part of the Rijeka's 2020 project, but what happened to Rijeka, as probably we collaborated already then with Novi Sad, at that time preparing your bid to become European Capital of Culture. I understand that the biggest I would say, and the best thing that stayed in our city, no matter that we couldn't really produce our project because of the COVID situation, what is now important is that many young people through this kind of education became more connected to the networks in Europe and became much more aware producers which are cultivating different relationships. And in my own opinion, this is the biggest thing that happened to Rijeka. So my conclusion would be in educational processes that they will definitely change, and they will change for the better, because now we are applying innovation and technology into all different ways of functioning. I would love to thank you for inviting me. I will definitely send my own contact and web pages. I believe that each of us can communicate further on the topics that we presented here. Also, I wish Novi Sad all the best in being the European Capital of Culture, which is proudly one of the certainly most important projects of Europe for the past 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. I think that the education in arts and culture and connecting with innovation, new technology is crucial in this moment, especially for the young people, from the students, from the citizens in general, and can help all of us to be part of the new society and a new way of how we will see the art and culture in the future. Thank you again.
Exactly, Biljana. Thank you.
Thank you. And at the end, we have an artist from the Academy of Arts in the city of Novi Sad, Professor Mirjana Blagojev. She will present us something about the sculpture and how we will see the sculpture in the public space for the future. And she will tell us a little bit about what she thinks, how the arts will develop in the future. Mirjana, please.
Thank you, Biljana, and thank you everybody for your great presentations. I will just start with presentation. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so the topic I will present today is sculpture and art installation in public space as one of the crucial elements of the development of every social community. Art in creations in public space are accessible to everyone, which makes them suitable, in fact, for forming the artistic taste of the public. Everybody are consumers of this type of art, from local community to bystanders from different cultural environments, and that makes components of those works they must be certain. They must have certain universality and be in the same time specific to that local community. That is why the language of those works must contain well-known and recognizable elements, but those elements put in specific context could open new dialogues and interpretations of the audience. We can say that art in public space, in fact, helps people to perceive their surrounding from another perspective. I have marked off several characteristics of contemporary art, which appeared as a pivotal element for the development of art in public space. And in my opinion, those elements are eliciting questions, influencing reactions, interpreting the artwork, and interacting with the public on physical and intellectual level. In the beginning, I will try to underline some key elements, which in my opinion should be the foundation of the artworks, especially artworks in public space. And those elements are interaction and communication with the public, the relationship between surrounding space and artwork, the relationship between art and craft, the use of new technologies, the relationship between virtual and real space, illusion, art activism, and the development of ecological conscience, and multidisciplinary. I will talk about each of them through some examples which are well known, but also I will present some examples from here to show what is happening on the art scene in the Republic of former Yugoslavia. So interaction and communication with the public became one of the critical characteristics of contemporary artworks. And the reason for that could be that modern people need dynamic artworks which engage their attention. And participation of the public in the functionality of the artwork provides that people will start to discuss or evoke some memories or questions or feelings. The Red Ball is a project by American artist Kurt Persch, which is a traveling art piece which has traveled to over 25 different places around the world. And this artist worked with the local community, and this ball, which easy interact with the people, in fact provoke many stories and about the town and moves people's imagination. Here I have chosen one example from the region. This is a music staircase in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this piece was inspired by the proximity of the cultural center Sloga, which was an iconic venue where a lot of musicians started their careers and in 60s and 70s. Now along those stairs we can find the music boxes where people can select and listen some of the greatest songs and read the artists' biographies. We can say that this kind of artwork, which is based on music or games, easily interact with people and evoke memories or feelings and evoke reactions of the people. And in this way, it is possible to open some critical questions. Relationship between surrounding settings and artwork has always been one of the crucial factors of art pieces in public space. Artwork, in fact, in public space must be in correlation, physical and conceptual, with its location. Connection of the surrounding landscape and the relevant history of the artwork location could be one of the ways to connect the artwork with the place, with its location. The monument of the victims of communism in Prague is a perfect example how an art piece is incorporated into the architectural environment. Also, I want to mention here that one of the ways that include both of these principles that I talked about, to integrate art piece into surrounding space and in the same time to involve spectator to the story, is the use of reflection. And for me, one of the perfect examples of those pieces is a work of Argentinian conceptual artist Leandro Ehrlich, who made like a big building facade, which is on the ground, on the pavement. And he put one large mirror angled about 45 degrees and encouraged people to sit and lay on the facade on the ground, which results with images of people who climb and dangle from the building front. The next element is the relationship between art and craft. And in my opinion, in contemporary art, there are two basic directions. On the one side, we have a return to the importance of skill and craftsmanship in art. And on the other side, we have the use of new technologies. The crucial role of materials and skills became extremely important in the 20th century with the sudden development of new technologies, when in fact some artists stood up to defend the traditional way of artwork. This element gained the importance by renewing the conception of pure visual sensation and the visual clarity of artistic expression. I have chosen here one piece from the New Zealand sculptor David McCracken, and this staircase, this piece looks like an infinite staircase. And this is a masterly crafted sculpture which plays with perspective rules and the visual effects which are related to simulating distance. Here I want to say a few words about sculpture in public space in Serbia. And it is the case, like in most other republics of former Yugoslavia, that in public space we can find mostly memorial sculpture. But examples of sculpture, contemporary sculpture in public space are very rare. One of the exceptions is the town of Šabac in Serbia, where a local community, in fact, together with local companies, supported the installation of sculptures in public space. One example is the sculpture Fabrika from Branislav Nikolic. And this is a piece which was cast in concrete in situ because the work had to be in balance with construction works that was carried out on the location. And this piece evokes the industrial past of the place and of the region in general. The next element is the use of new technologies. And we can say that perception of the artwork has changed with the use of new technologies. Development of technology caused significant changes in the way of life, and artists follow those changes and react to them. That's one of the outputs was that public space became a polygon for art creations which use interactive audiovisual installations. Related to this element is the relationship between virtual and illusionistic and actual space. And following the achievements of new technologies, artists gradually conquer other spaces apart from 2- and 3-dimensional space and illusionistic space. And virtual space, in fact, introduce spectator in a new dimension where spectator can literally enter by using VR glasses. That way, the spectator can move in one new space, which changes his perception of reality, but also that change how we understand an artwork. An example which illustrates well this principle is a project of named Sculpture Between Virtual and Actual Space, led by Aleksandar Bunčić, artist from Novi Sad, in which I participated as well. This experience opened up some critical questions for me, but one of the most essential was the position of the artwork in public space. The approach to setting up an art piece, permanent art piece in public space is not simple, and it depends on many factors and also on limitations of the urban space. On the other side, pieces in so-called augmented reality don't occupy real space, but they are visible with the help of digital devices. This kind of sculpture can be created directly in a computer program by using VR glasses, which example we can see here on the right side, or it can be made traditionally and then scanned and transposed by using a computer program in virtual space in so-called augmented reality. An example of this kind of sculpture we can see here on the left side. I can say that this possibility offers a lot of new options and opportunities for art in public space. Illusion has always been a crucial element in visual arts. And before it was limited to 2 or 3 dimensions, as it was a space where visual arts works were situated. Today, artists also use the classical media as painting and sculpting for make an illusion, and illusionistic paintings by 3D pavement in art inventor Kurt Vanner, who use perspective rules to make an illusion. In his work, Vanner played with perspective rules authentic to the Baroque, and he turns over, in fact, the position of the painting. Ceilings in the Baroque churches were painted to open the space of heaven to the audience. Vanner used similar scenes and similar way of painting, but he paint on the ground, on the pavement, which induce some questions to the audience. One more work that I want to mention here is also a work from Leandro Ehrlich, who made an illusion by making a swimming pool and make the illusion that people walk inside the swimming pool. What is magnificent for me here is how he made this illusion. He made it with a simple glass sheet covered with 10 centimeters of water, and that is the example how this artist, using by simple interventions, causes the space we know to turn upside down. Here I want to return to reflection one more time, because the use of reflection is a unique type of illusion which does not belong to one nor another trend, which is between, in fact, 2 and 3 dimensions and between illusion and reality. This is the only element that still cannot get modified in virtual space. And we can see here example for this. This is the same sculpture in actual space, and in fact it transposed in augmented reality where reflection cannot be achieved. Art activism has always been present, as artists often react to the social circumstances and talked about problems that other people didn't dare to do. For example, Ai Weiwei, China's artist and activist, covers the Berlin concert hall with 14,000 refugee orange life jackets to draw attention to the Europe refugee crisis. Also very present subject in contemporary art, consider our life and on this planet. And that's why ecology is one of the key elements of art today. And one of the most important contemporary artists, Olafur Eliasson, in his project Little Sun, made small LED lamps which provide light, in fact, to people who live outside the electrical grid system. In that way, Eliasson incorporates an aesthetical and functional components to address the importance to the using of renewable energy sources. And finally, multidisciplinary. We can see that all these elements we talked about are often present together in the works of contemporary art. I have chosen here two examples from the region. The first is the project From Noise to Sound from Nikola Matsura, artist from Novi Sad, where he made music instruments from military trash for professional musicians to play in different symbolic places. The other example is from Croatia, Zadar. It's a sea organ by architect Nikola Bašić, and this is an architectural sound object based on a natural factor, where sea waves produce sound through tubes inserted into the marble steps. And after what we have seen here, we can say that art in public space will remain one of the pivotal mediums for creating the artistic taste of the public. Artists today use works in public space to draw attention to different problems and critical questions in society. And we can agree that the fundamental goals of piece of public art are to initiate questions, to point out problems or evoke certain feelings or memories. And this, in my opinion, will remain the same in the future. Only the tools and the language used in creating artworks are transitoring with the development of humanity and technology. Therefore, we can infer that the artist will keep using traditional media such as painting and sculpting, but they will improve the use of new technologies in creating artworks in public space. And I want to finish with the words of Danish artist Jeb Hain, who said, I consider art in public as a social sign with the ability to provoke and challenge communication and reflection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirjana. Thank you all for the exchanging of ideas and waves in which direction art and culture will go. For sure, if you have some question inside of the participant, please, you can ask what you want, but I want to tell you that Culture Center of Vojvodina will for sure make a publication based on this presentation, not so soon, next year. And this publication will be on English and on Serbian language. And thank you again. I think that we reach the point, and this exchanging knowledge and ideas always give us new potential for the new future. Thank you.